Hello, welcome to this video on global variables part 2. In this video, we're looking at the Moodle Formulas question type and dive in a little bit deeper into what you can do with global variables. Okay, so because Moodle utilizes programming languages as part of its core, Moodle has access to a lot of really basic and sometimes advanced math functions as part of the Moodle Formulas question type to evaluate student answers or to provide data to certain questions. Now, these aren't necessarily verbatim programming languages or even verbatim syntax from certain programming languages. I like to say that it's kind of like pseudo-syntax or pseudo-functions that are being used. So it kind of looks like some PHP math functions and it kind of looks like some JavaScript functions, but it's really not in terms of those languages themselves. So sometimes people ask, well, what should I do then? Do I need to go out and learn a programming language? Definitely not. What I like to tell people actually is, if Microsoft Excel can do it, then it's quite likely that the Moodle Formulas question type can also do it. If you are familiar with the programming language of JavaScript, or at least somewhat, math.js functions are really at its core, and you can certainly access all of those. Okay, so if you want to find out what it can do and what it can't do, really right on the whim, is you can access the moodleformulas.org for a full list of functions. So you can find things like ceiling, floor, log base 10, max and min. You can do lots of different basic math functions within global variables and utilize those within the Moodle Formulas question type. Okay, so let's dive in and have a look at this. Okay, so we'll create a new question, formulas question type. Let's name our question. So we'll call this delete-global simple calculations. We'll open up our variables and we'll create a random variable. Our first one will be something known as mynum1 and is a number between 10.01 and 10.49 in 2 decimal increments, or a number from 100.01 to 100.49 in 2 decimal increments. So essentially here we're picking a number that's close to 10 or possibly a number that's close to 100. And maybe what we're going to set out to do here is take whatever mynum1 is and round up to the next whole number. So to do that, we'll need a global variable defined, and we're going to access the commonly used math function ceiling for this. So global variable is answer1 is the ceiling of mynum1. And of course, our ceiling function is going to do exactly what we need to round up to the next whole number. Okay, so there we go. We've got our random variable and we've got our global variable, and we're calling in our random variable into our global variable to perform some type of math calculation on it. In our question text is going to be part A, round the number mynum1 up to the nearest whole number. And we'll put in our placeholder here, part 1. So we'll go down to our part 1 and we'll provide an answer here. So that's going to be our global variable answer1. Our grading criterion will change this to 0. And of course our placeholder we want to name is going to be hashtag part 1. We should double check this, make sure we have what we need here. Our placeholder needs to be hashtag part 1. And we need to have answer1 defined prior. So we've got hashtag part 1 there, and we've got answer1 defined here. Perfect. There we go. We'll save those changes, and we'll preview our question. So it says round the number 100.08 up to the nearest whole number. That would be 101, and we'll check, and that's correct. So the question's doing exactly what we need to. Let's go on now and look at some other ways that we can use random variables and global variables together. So for random variables, what we're going to do is add in a couple more here. We're going to call A, or random variable A, to be a number from 3 to 10 in steps of 1, and B to be a number from 20 to 40 in steps of 0.1. There we go. Now what we're going to do is calculate something. So let's suppose maybe these are legs on a right triangle, where we have a leg that's called A and a leg that's called B, and maybe what we need to do is determine the length of C, or the hypotenuse in this right triangle. So what I'm going to do is build some global variables that call in A and B and perform some math calculation on them. So here we go. Our global variable C squared is given by A squared plus B squared. Our next global variable is we're going to say, let's then take the square root of whatever c squared was. And then our next global variable is going to then be round our prior global variable to 2 decimal places. So one thing I want you to take note of here is that global variables do have that ability to call in a prior defined global variable for the sake of calculations. So this can work out really nicely, so you can do things like I'm doing here, such as rounding a final answer to 2 decimal places. So let's see what we have here. We'll go to our question text and we'll add in some question text. So this will be part B, and it says, in a right triangle, A equals A and B equals B, determine the length of the hypotenuse. There we go. And of course, what we're going to do here is ask our students to make sure that they round to 2 decimals. And we want to add that placeholder in here of part 2. And of course, we need the syntax to have the hashtag at the start. There we go. So we have the makings of a really good question. Let's go down to the bottom and define the answer to this part 2. So part 1, we expand that. We add more blanks for more parts. And we go to part 2 now. And in part 2, we want students to respond with the answer 2. I've told them to round to 2 decimal places, so I want them to round to 2 decimal places, or they'll be marked wrong. And then under the placeholder name, we're just going to go part 2 with a hashtag in front, and all should be good. We'll save those changes, and then preview the question. So for part A, we said round the number 100.16 up to the nearest whole number. That'll be 101. And then in a right triangle, where A is 6 and B is 34.5, determine the length of the hypotenuse. I don't have a calculator handy with me right now, so I'm just going to fill in the answer, and it comes up to be 35.02, which certainly does sound correct. We'll check it, and all is working well. Okay, so thanks for watching this video on Global Variables Part 2 in the Moodle Formulas Question Type series regarding simple math calculations.